Girlfriends, episode number 390, Your Friends in Heaven with Becca Corbell. Hello and welcome to Girlfriends. I'm Danielle Bean. I'm a wife and a mom, and I'm on a mission to help you know your worth as a woman so you can find peace, balance, and joy in family living. This week, we are talking with a special guest, Becca Corbell, about our friends, the saints in heaven. Can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hello, girlfriend. So glad you are joining me here today. Today's topic is one that's very Catholic, right? Because we're talking about the saints. And yet even I, as a cradle Catholic, find that I need to remind myself again and again of the gift that we have in the communion of saints. Like, this is something that I need to be reminded of. And I'm continually amazed at the variety of saints that there are in the church. You know, if you think there's one right way to be holy, well, you need to read some lives of the saints because they are all over the map. You know, one author that I really enjoy with this regard is Meg Hunter Kilmer. And she writes books. She's written some for grownups, but also some for kids, saints around the world. And she just gets these beautiful stories of these obscure saints. We've had her here on the podcast before to share about it. And I just always find myself inspired and encouraged that, you know what, probably you and I can be saints too, right? Because we sometimes think like that's another kind of person, right? A saint is a different kind of person. That's not me. That doesn't really have real life application for me in the way that I'm living my life, right? But we're all called to be saints. And when we look at the variety of the ways that saints lived out their lives, we can really be encouraged and inspired along those lines. Have you ever had the experience of a saint like just kind of showing up for you, kind of following you or stalking you? I've heard from many people that have experienced this, like you become aware of a new saint or there's a saint that you've been aware of, but not really looked at their life very much, haven't prayed to them. And all of a sudden you like see them everywhere. You see references to them everywhere. Someone might give you a book about them or you'll find a holy card with them on it. I really think this is such a beautiful way of recognizing that the saints are real and they are our friends in heaven who are praying for us. What a powerful thing that is. What a beautiful and encouraging truth of our Catholic faith that is, that we are not alone in this battle. People, real people who've gone before us and have set us these beautiful examples of living lives of holiness are actively praying for us from their places in heaven. That's pretty powerful ally, right? Like if in the world, in your everyday life, if you knew like a powerful person, say you knew somebody who is like close to the president, right? Or something like that, like you'd feel like, oh, I can maybe get something accomplished. Like maybe this person can influence this powerful person for my good. Well, like that's meaningless. But in comparison, like, what if you have this in with God, right? Of course, every one of us can pray directly to God and we should pray directly to God. But then the saints and Mary especially are God's people that he has already brought into heaven and that he has this special, unique love for each one of them. And they already have set this beautiful example of living out a life of holiness and faithfulness. So who better than the saints for us to turn to ask for everyday support, to ask to help us grow in holiness, to ask to help us grow in relationship with God? We have that real support. The communion of saints is a beautiful thing, a beautiful teaching of the church that they can pray for us, that we can pray for those who have died, who may be in purgatory, but then people in heaven can be praying for us here on earth. What a beautiful gift. I think that's amazing. And so that's what I want us to talk about here today. And actually had a really beautiful conversation with Becca Corbell, who's sharing just about some goings on over at the Seton Shrine. So we're going to talk a lot about Elizabeth Ann Seton, a personal favorite saint of mine and one I've spent a lot of time kind of learning more about. But what Becca shares is also really encouraging and inspiring to know the good things that are going on over at the shrine in Maryland. So here's our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Our special guest joining me here today on Girlfriends is Becca Corbell. Becca has worked at the Seton Shrine in Emmitsburg, Maryland for the last 10 years, where she is Associate Director of Programs. What started as a summer job as a tour guide of Mother Seton's homes has turned into a career in promoting the life and legacy of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. Becca has worked in many aspects of the Shrine's programming since the days of her giving her first tour. Most notably, she has worked in the Basilica and Liturgical life at the Shrine for 7 years, directed the Shrine's popular faith drama Back from the Dead for 6 years, and helped to found the Shrine's Prayer Line Ministry in the midst of the pandemic. She's a proud native of the small town of Emmitsburg in Maryland, and in her spare time, she can be found going to enjoy a concert or backpacking in the Appalachian Mountains. Becca Corbell, welcome to Girlfriends. So happy you're here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with the girlfriends.
Yes. And what a great saint for us to focus on here. Yes. I am a fangirl of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, have been forever, was the name of my parish when I was growing up. So I had this kind of special affinity for her. But then since becoming a mom, like this is a woman saint, right? Like this woman who lived a real life and, educated her children and other people's children. Like there's so much to admire there. How about for you personally? What was the draw for you to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, first of all?
Well, I'm from Emmitsburg, so she's entombed here. Her basilica is here. So I've always kind of grown up hearing about her. It sounds terrible to say, but a lot of us from Emmitsburg just think like, she's the local girl, nothing special. But then working here as a tour guide, obviously getting to know her more. Mm-hmm. And it sounds cheesy to say, but her friendships really are what drew me to her. Her personality, she's a very vivacious person. She's constantly writing in the margins of books or underlining letters to her children 4 or 5 times saying, don't forget your mother's your best friend, underline. Yeah, and just her so fervent letters with her girlfriends, Rebecca Seton, Rebecca Scott, Julia Scott, and the women that she grew up with and did things in New York. Her sister-in-laws, Cecilia and Harriet, came with her to Emmitsburg, and just reading their writings drew me in, sucked me in.
Yeah, I think that is so great, and that's part of what I love about her too, and that we have so much of her writings. Really, just makes her come to life. You can just hear like the everydayness in what she shares. And it's just an ordinary life lived out in extraordinary holiness. So I think such a beautiful example for kind of the rest of us, right? An ordinary saint living an ordinary life, but very doing ordinary. It in this remarkable
she even
way.
Writes to her children her sons as they get older, what are you reading? Are you eating well? Like all of these things that we all still say.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I think that's so great. Okay, so in your bio, we read about this Back from the Dead program. So can you tell us what that is? Because I've heard a lot about it. I haven't experienced it myself, but I do know it is a really popular offering at the Seton Shrine.
It is very popular. We see around 3,000 people every year that come to it. It was founded by a priest who was doing campus ministry here at the time, Father Brian Nolan. He's a priest of our archdiocese.
Nice.
And he took students to a hayride as part of a campus ministry thing. And when they got on, it was kind of a haunted hayride thing. And they had to sign their soul away to the devil. And he said, like, nope, we're not doing that. And he marched everybody off the hayride. And so immediately just started reflecting on like, why does the devil get to own this Halloween, especially in October, November? We're talking about eternity in the readings at Mass. It's a very integral part of our Catholic heritage. And Mother Seton actually herself was buried with a crucifix that has a giant skull and crossbone on the bottom. Like, wow. There's just a lot of heritage, and she's a relatively new saint, as church history goes. Sure. So he started this drama, and it's an immersive drama. It's usually outside in a cemetery. Ours is in the cemetery Mother Seton was originally in. And you meet different characters. Some are fictional, most are saints, and they tell you about their life and ask you if you're ready to experience your death. Wow. And what that might look like. It's a lot of rhetorical questions of, are you using your time well, basically? And will you regret anything later? Because we still have time to get better. Right. And here's Father Stanley Rother telling you how he lived his life, and Pier Giorgio and Gianna Molla and Maria Goretti and Mother Seton, Faustina. So for the 6 years, this is my first year not running it. We have a great director running it. But for the 6 years I've worked with Father Brian, we've written a lot of scripts. So I think we have 40 different scripts from saints all over the world that just witness to you and help you to reflect. And then you come into the Basilica and you have the opportunity for confession and just time in the Basilica to pray. So the confession lines are always really, really long and really fruitful. It's beautiful. Geared toward high school and college age kids.
Sure.
But it's really great.
Oh, I love that it's like a nice alternative to those spooky rides, because there's a reason people are attracted to that, right? Like we're curious about these things, and there's a level of, just wanting to engage on that level about, what happens after we die, right? Yeah. So I think this is such a beautiful Catholic response to that in a way that's educational, but also probably kind of fun to do.
Yes, it's always outside. There's a lot of lanterns. When Joan of Arc is there's a big bonfire, and
oh, it's great.
It's cold. Their trees have the leaves, and it's very aesthetic, but also more impactful than people think going in.
Yeah. Okay. So when does that take place at the shrine? Because this is this podcast is going to publish like toward the end of September. And so there'll be still time for people to participate, right?
Yeah. So tickets are on sale then. They go on sale September 1st, and it's the last 3 weekends of October every year.
Okay. Still time to make plans. Make a little pilgrimage to Maryland. I think that's such a great idea. I love that. And this isn't the only kind of live action that's going on at the shrine, right?
No.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the other things.
Yeah. So we also have a living history program that is basically, if people are familiar with it, at least on the East Coast with Williamsburg and other kind of colonial back in time things. So you can actually go on Fridays and Saturdays to the houses that Mother Seton lived. You can go to those houses every day, but on Fridays and Saturdays, they're back in 1818 and Mother Seton's still alive. You meet interpreters that are portraying the sisters that live with her, and you meet children that are part of our junior history program that are interpreting real students. Very cool. They're there taking classes that the same real students took. They're learning needlepoint. They're learning music, art, German, French, all kinds of public speaking, all history. But they research their real person that lived and worked here and went to school here. And then they show groups of tourists or school groups around the academy and what they're doing and what they're learning as if they're in 1818.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really rare in the history world to have that many interpreters presenting together, let alone children who can say all kinds of things. Yeah.
That is quite the program. So yeah, definitely worth a trip to Emmitsburg. And this museum, which is going to be opening up in just a few weeks, but it will be open by the time this episode publishes. Tell us about that project.
Yeah, so we have been really focused on the programming for a long time. And our museum was built by the sisters originally back in the 90s. And so we've never really paid too much attention to it. It's just there aren't a lot of artifacts, or there is a replica. So the houses are where we've been focusing. Well, we decided to change that. And so all of Mother Seton's writings, her books, gifts that people gave her, her family's possessions have sort of made their way back to the shrine over the last few years. And so we have a brand new museum with 3 different galleries just about her life and the different relationships she had with, I have jokingly been saying we're going from 10% artifacts to 100% artifacts.
Wow.
So the trainings for these staff that we've been doing have taken 3 to 4 hours just to train them on all the content. It's really, really cool. And then we now have 2 temporary rotating exhibits as well. One of which is ours, and one is the archives for the sisters that live here, the Daughters of Charity. So we'll have our permanent collection on Mother Seton and then rotating exhibits as well. So it's going from 0 to 60. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. And all just because you have these artifacts, which
so the
such
Sisters
a treasure.
of Charity of New York very graciously gave us a huge collection, and that started the Shrine's archival collection. And then since then we've been given other things, and it's really cool.
I love that. So who funded the museum? Are you dependent on donors at the Shrine?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Depend on donors. A bunch of people. We have a national leaders committee, which are just friends all over the country that have helped us do this. But then Ascension Health, which is a healthcare network that was originally founded by the sisters that live here, the Daughters of Charity. Their healthcare network has been huge. Their leadership has been huge to help us do this. But it's taken the gifts of many people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting back to Mother Seton, like, why do you think she's a really relevant saint for the world today? I mean, I think especially because of some of the things we talked about, how relatable she is, right? But also that she's an American. Are there aspects of her life that you think are really applicable to the world today?
Oh my gosh. Yes, is the short answer. The long answer is
give us a medium answer.
Yeah. Okay, good. Not a lot of people love Mother Seton, which is wonderful. Not a lot of people know Mother Seton and everything that she went through. She lost her mother when she was very young, grew up in a kind of blended family, a broken home. Her husband widowed. She was widowed at 9. She was married at 19. She was widowed at 29.
Right.
They went bankrupt. They went through that process. She cared for ill loved ones. The country itself was figuring out what was happening. She was born 2 years before the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
So just there's so many aspects. And then even just moving here, we do several outreach programs at the shrine with people living in poverty or experiencing hardship and taking them through Mother Seton's homes. I've taken hundreds of people through the homes, but taking them where they're living in a 1-room apartment, they know what it's like to live in the size house that she first moved into because it's about the size of their apartment.
Wow.
And so they know, I can say, oh, there were 16 women living here, and people go, oh my gosh. But them to say like, yep, okay, that's doable.
I've seen what that feels like.
There's so many facets to who she is, what she experienced. She had friends that stopped talking to her when she converted. The whole conversion process, so many people can identify with, wrestling with, and hearing spiritual mentors from both sides tell you, this is right. This is right. There's so many aspects of her life that people find ways in other than just teacher, wife, mom, widow.
Right. Right. Those kinds of labels that we kind of simplify people's lives with. There is such a richness there. And that's part of why I really encourage people to read her writings, because there's so much you learn about what she experienced, and just her steadfast faith through all of that is so encouraging. Like I remember there was one where the kids were all sick, right? And I was reading this letter she wrote where it was like a little bit, not really complaining, but just noting, how tiresome it was and how needy the children were. And I could so relate to that. And, just those little things, it just really humanizes her, because I think we have this way of, with the saints, they're like a statue at church and they're perfect and they're, on a pedestal, and what I love about St. Elizabeth Seton is that she, through her writings, really comes to life, and you can see like, she wasn't just standing there with a smile on her face and a halo, right? Like she was living real life, real struggles, real trials, real grief and loss that she experienced in her life. And I mean, that just has applications to so many different things that we experience in the church today.
Yes. Yeah. And even the church, she probably would want me to bring up, she struggled with the church too. And the leadership.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah.
Because we're right there, right? Some of us.
Right. That's something we might be able to identify with sometimes. She was she founded the first congregation of women in this country. So doing that, and the politics behind that, and who wanted what where and how they wanted it set up. And she was not an easily swayed woman. And she had very firm thoughts and would say, like, I get this priest out of here. I'm only listening to this person. I know what I want to do. And that was never done in her time, let alone, sometimes it's not done in our time. And she was first and foremost a mother. That was a thing for her, that if she couldn't bring her children, she was not interested. And her children were young. Her oldest was 14. So yeah, I agree with you. The writings, when I started here as a tour guide, I did not read any biographies. I just read her writings. And that was my inroad too. There's smaller books that have excerpts of her writings as well that are easier. But even that moment with the sick kids, I know exactly what you're talking about. She talks about them always clinging to her.
Yes, yes.
She's like, I put one down and two more come over to me and they're always touching me. Like, and while it's beautiful and we love it, like we know what that feels like. So
for sure. And let's talk about her as a pioneer in education.
Oh,
I mean, we haven't even talked about that yet. Like the founder of like the parochial school system in the United States. Like this is big stuff. And much. The fact that she was educating not just poor kids, but poor girls, like unheard of, right? Yes. Valuing these human beings in a way that the culture did not. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. She did not see any of the division that they had back then. So girls' education and tailoring it to what the specific girl needed. Right. So if they, quote unquote, like had prospects or came from a wealthier family, they would learn slightly different things than if you were most likely going to be working a farm or working a trade with your husband. Mm-hmm. They learned what they needed, and she wanted to build them up in that and support them in that. And just the nuanced kind of education, the spiritual integration with their education. Right. She would often, like, their quote unquote punishments for unruly behavior was like, kneel in front of this painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe and think about what you've done. Like, okay, that's great. It's so integrated, and it reminds you, Mother Seton was very focused on eternity and the eternal ramifications. Mm-hmm. So she was constantly working that into life with the students. Right. Yeah. But she also, her sisters went on to found, so they had a school for Black children as well. And then eventually that was integrated. It was one of the first integrated academies as well. She just, she wanted to teach and care for children. She always has. Even in New York, before her conversion, she was caring for widows and orphans. She was a mom. Yeah. She was a mom's heart, 100%.
So beautiful. So beautiful. So I really want to encourage people to, like I said, make that pilgrimage if you possibly can. Like, this is a worthwhile thing. I hear from people sometimes that, they'll ask about like what kinds of, spiritual sites we have in the US, and I remember years ago when I was publishing magazines, that was an annual thing. We would kind of publish a guide to different spiritual sites in the US. And there's some like really rare gems in there. And I think the shrine is becoming like one of the must sees, in the US for a Catholic family. So a great way to educate yourself and educate your kids, inspire yourself. So if people are going to come in person, like after the museum opens up, what might their experience be of the museum, especially?
Well, I hope it's inspiring, and I hope it's encouraging I hope it encourages people that sainthood is possible. Yeah. And no matter what you're dealing with or what has happened to you, that it's doable. That is what we really hope people walk away from. Even if you've come here before and you know Mother Seton's story, the museum is out of the basement, we're upstairs. The architecture is stunning. There's stained glass and archways and marble everywhere. And it's a beautiful, beautiful space. And from the visitor center, you can see directly to the main altar of the Basilica. Oh, wow. And it really feels like Mother Seton's whole life was leading up to the Basilica. Yeah. It just sucks you into the Basilica and the liturgical life. I would love it if people came here and they were inspired and they went back and just found a greater devotion to the Eucharist. That was really what brought Mother Seton to the Catholic Church.
Yes. Describe that story, because I love that. It's so powerful.
So she was an Episcopalian and a pretty devout one. And the Episcopalian Church was kind of changing their understanding of transubstantiation. And so she really struggled with that she struggled with how it wasn't Jesus. Like, it just always made sense to her that it was. Right. And her husband even gave her this painting for their engagement of our Lord holding bread and a chalice. And she took that, it was essentially a poster, and she took it with her everywhere and made sure that the bankruptcy didn't take it. And, so then when she realized in Italy that the Catholic Church believed that, because she had never experienced that until then, she just immediately felt at home. And then she wrestled with the conversion. She knew she would have to convert to receive our Lord in the Eucharist. And when she finally did, in her Mother Seton way, she writes in all caps, "At last, God is mine and I am his."
So beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And that, both that and Mary, surprisingly enough, were the two things that she knew she wanted, which are often two stumbling blocks for a lot of converts. She just knew that's what she wanted.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And, when you read a story like that, I remember reading about her conversion and it being really all about the Eucharist. As a cradle Catholic, it inspires me to remember like what this gift is and to not take it for granted. So beautifully inspirational in that way. So, but some people listening are not going to be able to make it to Maryland, right?
Sure.
So let's talk about what kind of virtual options are available. I know because I've been blessed to be a part of the Shrine's website for several years now, where I've had the opportunity to write these reflections on Mother Seton's life. And there are other Catholic writers that are a part of that project as well. So that's one part that I'm aware of, but I think there are other things too. So describe to us what people can experience from their own homes.
Yeah, so the book club is kind of one of our keynote virtual programs. We do these virtual book clubs. We started it in the pandemic. And we started it actually as a way for our tour guides to connect with each other during the pandemic and continue to learn. And then we started opening it up to the public. So we go through either books about Mother Seton or books she read. And one of our staff kind of guides the discussion there every week. And you meet on Zoom and talk for about an hour about it's just like a book club, you have friends on the book club and you learn a new aspect of Mother Seton's life. So they're just finishing a biography, and I think they're going to do next one of the spiritual classics that Mother Seton read, Following of Christ, Imitation of Christ. So
Beautiful.
That's exciting to see. So they'll read it with Mother Seton's marginal notes.
Oh, that's so great.
We'll know what she thought about it.
I love that because you know what? She's continuing to teach, right? And isn't that what was so close to her heart? Was she was such a teacher. And so through these notes in the margins, we can have Mother Seton as our teacher. Who wouldn't want that?
Yes, I know.
Yeah. Well, so before we have to wrap up, can you tell us where can people get that information? Like somebody wants to join the book club or they want to know more about the museum, like What's the best website for them to go to?
SetonShrine.org.
Okay.
Yes,
That's very simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a page on there about the new museum. If you go into the Learn tab, the book clubs are there. Virtual tours are there. Recordings of like a Google 360. You can see the Basilica. There's a lot of resources online.
Wonderful. Well, one last question. What's one thing that you wish everybody knew about Mother Seton?
Oh man. That she's a really faithful friend, I think. That's what I tell most people. Yeah. That if you're praying to her, things will happen and she will show up. Yeah, she's a really powerful intercessor.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. My guest here today has been Becca Corbell from the Seton Shrine in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Thank you, Becca, for being a part of the show today and for sharing a little bit about our heavenly friend, Mother Seton.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, girlfriends.
So glad you were here. All right, we've got more of the show coming up, but we're going to take a quick break. I'm Danielle Bean, and you're listening to the Girlfriends Podcast.
All who have died in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their salvation. But after death, they undergo a purification so as to achieve the holiness necessary to actually be able to enter into the joy of heaven. We want to look at the reality of purgatory in a very clear and objective fashion, as opposed to sort of the popular notions or even the popular piety that has surrounded the actual doctrine of purgatory. Remember that no one lives alone, no one sins alone, and no one is saved alone. You and I are engaged together in the work of sanctification, my soul, your soul, and the souls of the faithful departed. Let's not forget them, but accompany them, as St. Ambrose said, all the way to the mountain of the glory of God.
right. Now we're at the point in the show where I like to share some listener feedback or a listener question with you. And this week I heard from Emily. And the subject line of this email was, how can I get my husband to lose weight? That got my attention, right? And Emily wrote to me, she said, my husband and I have been married for 16 years and we have 4 great kids. I really love my husband, but I'm struggling with the fact that he's put on a lot of weight in recent years. He used to care a lot about his physical fitness and was very active. But then he took on a stressful new job a couple of years ago, and all of that has gone out the window. I understand that, but I do want him to be healthy, and it's hard for me to not take it personally that he seems to put zero effort into his physical appearance. I work hard to stay in shape and eat well, and I always want to look nice for him, but he just does not seem to care. He has time on weekends, but all he seems to want to do is watch TV. How should I talk to him about this? Okay. So this is from Emily. Emily, thank you for your question. Like I said, you got my attention with that subject line. How can I get my husband to lose weight? So first of all, let's answer that question. You can't. Not your job, right? You can't get him to. I think this is a really important thing. Whatever it is that you want to get your husband to do, like, you can't. In fact, sometimes we wives are the last person on earth who can get our husbands to do something, right? Because we just cross that fine line from helpfully suggesting things to he hears all this judgment in what, even if we're very careful in how we approach these difficult topics, sometimes he hears judgment, especially because it's coming from us, the person in the world whose approval he wants the most. It's you, his wife, the woman in his life. So recognize that you can't get him, right? It's a him thing. And you need to recognize that, but that doesn't mean there aren't things you can do to help support him toward that goal. But it sounds like it's not a goal of his right now. So maybe what you're thinking is, okay, how do I get it so that it is a goal, right? But first recognize you can't get him to do it. It's his choice. It's him that needs to be motivated. I know this. I'm speaking from experience. I have bugged. I don't like the word nagged. I have bugged my husband into things before, making commitments to things that he wouldn't have on his own, that kind of thing, always thinking it's for his own good. It doesn't usually go very well. And he winds up resenting the fact that I've kind of bullied him into these things. And that's just not the natural order, right? That's not how things are meant to be. So recognize that. Don't try to bully him. Don't try to shame him. I'm not saying that you're doing this, by the way, Emily, that I'm not saying that you are bullying him or shaming him, but just be aware of that, right? But maybe you could talk to him. You recognize, and rightly so, that this started with a stressful job that he took on. So for sure, that's a very common story, right? Stress happens. All of our healthy habits go out the window. That happens a lot. I've personally experienced it. It's like the last thing I'm going to worry about is going for a run or eating properly right now. Like, I am stressed about this thing. So I think we all can relate to that. I'm sure you can too, Emily, on some level. And it's very good that you're recognizing that, not just blaming him for this situation. But so that might be where you start talking with him about managing that stress. You say it's been a couple of years now. Well, it's time to manage the stress, right? If he's not managing it in a healthy way, then let's talk about it. And the way I would encourage you to talk about it with him is, how can I help you manage the stress that you feel from work? You're saying that on the weekends, he does have time, but he's just choosing to watch TV. Well, I can certainly understand that. Like, if ever you've gone through something stressful, sometimes that minute you get downtime, it's like, ugh, like I'm not going to do another thing, right? He might be feeling too tired to even set a goal for himself. But, maybe talk to him about that. Talk to him about how tired he feels, how stressed he feels. Because if that's going on in an ongoing way where he's not, able to take care of himself, he's not going to be very happy in that situation. Ultimately, that's not probably a good situation for the long term. So figure out a way that you can kind of help to manage it. And a great thing to do, a loving thing to do, would be to ask him, how can I help you? How can I help relieve some of the stress you feel? What are the things that maybe add to your stress here at home and in the family that maybe I can help with to kind of relieve some of that burden so that you could get back to feeling like yourself, so that you can feel good, so that you can feel like you can make decisions and set other goals other than just surviving your job, right? So if that's where he is, I think that's the best approach, is to just try to encourage him that you're in his corner, that you're on his team. Because, coming at him with any kind of judgment, anything that could even be construed as judgment, it's going to just let him know she's not on my team. And it's just another thing against me. I've got this work thing I'm trying to manage, and then I'm getting judged by it, for it by the woman that I love. So be very careful about that. Just be his helper. Ask how you can be his teammate. Ask how you can support him. And that really is it. Other than that, I'm going to tell you to just pray for him. Pray for him to fully become the person that God wants him to be, whatever that looks like. We say those marriage vows for better or for worse. And sometimes in living out some of the more challenging parts of our marriage, we think like this, I didn't mean this, right? And I'm not saying you're saying that, Emily, but sometimes that's the temptation to feel like, I feel negatively about this part of my spouse, this part of our relationship. And you can begin to feel like we're the only ones who struggle in this way. It's so easy to compare yourself to other people and the things they have going on. But I'm just going to caution you, like, your relationship is unique. It's the one that God has planned for you. You are the only wife your husband is going to get. You're the only one that can encourage and support him in the way that God has created you to do in that relationship. So really focus there and focus on praying for him to fully become the person God wants him to be, to grow in virtue, and then for yourself to fully become the person God wants you to be and grow in virtue, especially in your marriage. A prayer that I like to say just very simply at the start of most days is just asking God to show me how to be a good wife. How to be a good wife on this day, like specifically, like let me know how I can support my husband on this day. And you might make that a daily prayer, just day by day, just asking for the grace of knowing and responding to that nudge to how you can be a good wife. And sometimes it's hard. But I think the more that you do that, the more your husband will come to see that you're in his corner, and nothing but good things can come from that. All right. That's all the time we have for today. But if you have a question like Emily does, if you're listening here on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below with your question. I'd be glad to consider taking it up in a future episode of Girlfriends. If you're listening just audio, you can always email me, danielle@daniellebean.com, or you can connect with me always over at goodcatholic.com. We are growing a faith-filled, prayerful community over there. Would love for you to be a part of it. Come and check out all of the good things that we have going on over at goodcatholic.com. That's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank you for being here. I know that you have a busy life and you're doing many different things, so it means the world to me that you take time for Girlfriends each week. Truly, I am so grateful for your presence here. It is a true gift to me. Thank you for that. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your day and God bless your week.